Hi Kayla, I am glad that you come to me for a clarification of the classical conditioning concept. It is a new concept and it's easy to get confused when you learn it for the first time. Well, classical conditioning, simply put, is a process that produces learned response in an organism, and the response is elicited by a stimulus that is previously neutral. It is discovered by Ivan Pavlov, who was a Russian physiologist. Sometimes people also call it Pavlovian conditioning. What Pavlov discovered was that if you ring a bell right before presenting the meat powder to a dog, the dog can be conditioned to produce salivation with the sound of the bell alone, without the accompanying of the meat powder, as long as you build up the association of the bell and the meat powder repeatedly. And the conditioning here literally is training. And there are three phases in Pavlov's classical conditioning training procedure. The first one is before conditioning. So before conditioning, the meat powder elicits salivation in the dog. Meat powder is the unconditional stimulus. Salivation is the unconditional response. The key is automatic response. Meat powder produces automatic salivation in the dog. In contrast, a neutral stimulus, a bell, cannot produce salivation in the dog or cannot elicit salivation in the dog. But what's really fun is Pavlov associated the bell, the neutral stimulus, with the unconditional stimulus, the meat powder. And every time when he presented the meat powder, he rang the bell first. So the bell, meat powder, bell, meat powder, bell, meat powder, so that the connection is built up, that even hear the bell, the sound of the bell, the dog will salivate without the company of the meat powder. So the key during conditioning process is build up the association between the neutral stimulus and the unconditional stimulus, and then build up this association repeatedly, so that a learning can happen, and the dog learned that just hearing the sound of the bell would means the meat powder is coming, so salivation is produced. And so after conditioning, the sound of the bell is sufficient enough to elicit salivation in the dog specifically. And the bell changed from a previously neutral stimulus into a conditioned stimulus. And the salivation after conditioning is the conditioned response, because it is elicited from the bell, the conditioned stimulus, rather than from the meat powder, the unconditional stimulus. Now, can you tell me what can you summarize the definition for the unconditional stimulus, conditional stimulus, unconditional response, and the conditional response? Yes, I think you are absolutely right. Okay, I'm going to give you an example, a scenario, and then maybe you can practice identifying the unconditional stimulus, conditional stimulus, unconditional response, and conditional response. So here is the scenario. Miss Dean always needs to shout, "Stop talking," to her classroom so that they will quiet down. Usually, after she shouted, "Stop talking," her students quieted down automatically because they were compliant students. But Miss Dean got tired of always need to shout, "Stop talking." So she wanted to do something different. And what she did was a classical conditioning situation. What she did was each time before she shouted, "Stop talking," she clapped her hand 3 times. So clap her hand, stop talking, clap her hand, stop talking. She did that for several times, for several weeks, So by the end of the third week, just hearing the hand clapping 3 times from Miss Dean, her students quieted down. Can you tell me what is the unconditional stimulus? Yes, the request for students to stop talking. What is the unconditional response? Right, that students quieting down. What's the conditioned stimulus? Correct, hand clapping 3 times. What's the conditioned response? Correct, quiet down in her students. Wonderful. I think you are right on this concept and on all the terms. Now, can you think about your own examples based on your own learning experience or life experience, or your interactions in your family, with your friends? Why don't you come up with your own example and maybe present in class next time, so that our students can learn from you about classical conditioning better? Great. I look forward to your illustration of classical conditioning next time in class. Thanks for coming to meet with me. Bye.